Hey everybody, welcome back to Leosophy. This is the third part of the Entomology series, and we're covering the third of the big five, Hymenoptera. This one is probably going to be a little shorter because Hymenoptera is so complicated that it really deserves its own little addendum videos after the main 10 entomology vids, because Hymenoptera consists of three very interesting groups in and of themselves: ants, bees, and wasps. And wasps are incredibly diverse and complicated. Bees are sort of easily the most discussed insect of the 21st century, especially Apis mellifera, the honeybee. And then ants are interesting in and of themselves. I'm not, despite how interested I am in invertebrates, I've actually never kept ants. But let's start with the physiological differences between Hymenoptera and the big five. One notable thing about Hymenoptera is that they are holometabolists, so they undergo a complete metamorphosis. And what's kind of distinguishable about the larvae of Hymenoptera is they don't have the notable head capsule or the really that distinguished legs. There's one exception that I'll get into in a minute. That sort of set them apart from grubs and caterpillars. Because caterpillars have very noticeable heads and legs, and grubs have very noticeable head capsules that are very defined. And then you look at Hymenoptera, like if you've ever seen ants carrying their young, carrying the larvae, they're just kind of like white ovals. They don't really have discernible features, you know? They're just sort of little squishy white blobs. That's what a baby bee looks like. That's what a baby wasp looks like. That's what a baby ant looks like. Ants especially. At least with bees and wasps, you can kind of make out something of a face. But with ants, it's just like, they're almost maggot-like. I hate to draw that comparison because people hate maggots so much, but that's kind of sort of what they look like. Additionally, if you look at the pupal form is even more different because if you look at a chrysalis for butterflies, for example, it's a very discernible thing. It's very different from a caterpillar or a butterfly. Whereas, and similarly, the pupal form of a beetle, it looks kind of like an intermediate between the grub and the adult. Well, with Hymenoptera, it just pretty much it just goes from sort of larval-like to adult-like, to the point that like a pupa of a Hymenopteran, it looks like a shrink-wrapped adult. It looks like somebody just took a white plastic bag and shrink-wrapped like an ant or a bee or whatever it's going to grow up to be. It's kind of neat looking, and it's something worth Googling. But yeah. Let's see. We've covered the holometabolists. We've covered one of the most interesting things about Hymenoptera is the eusociality. Now, not all Hymenopterans are eusocial, but they're kind of the best examples. When we think of a eusocial animal, and by the way, a eusocial animal is an animal wherein the best word to use would probably be superorganism. You have overlapping generations where some members are completely most members are not reproductive at all. They are exclusively born to carry out other duties, and then you have a reproductive caste. So in other words, you have a caste system. And they're very clearly defined. There's not a lot of overlap. Like with animals that come close, like with termites, it's not that characteristic. And with naked mole rats, there's a huge amount of overlap. It's the difference between a brood mother mole rat and a regular female is it has more to do with hormone suppression than anything else. Whereas with Hymenoptera, you even get more castes than that. You've got the males who are just purely reproductive. They don't actually do much else. In ants they're called elites or alettes, and in whatever. And in bees they're called drones. And I've actually never heard the word for wasp, but I'm assuming it's also drone. But that's all they do. And then you've got the worker caste, and then you've got the reproductive caste, which is the queen. But then there's others. In many ants especially, you'll see massive workers, sometimes called soldiers. I think it's leafcutter ants. They have something like 5 or 7 castes. So it becomes highly specialized. And the reason why eusociality develops at all in Hymenoptera is they have a genetic trait known as a haplodiploidy, and it's very interesting. So, pretty much, if you think about it, I'm trying to draw comparisons here. That's why I side. Every person that you meet, male or female, they have 36 chromosomes, and they got 23 from their mother and 23 from their father, which is 50% of one parent's DNA and 50% of another parent's DNA, which adds up to 100%. That's not the case with haplodiploidy. In this case, males have half the chromosomes of the females. They have no fathers and only one grandfather, because they're what happens when a queen, a reproductive female, lays an unfertilized egg. So they have half the DNA. They have 100% of their traits come from their mother, which they got half of her traits. This means, if you do the math, if I had my whiteboard behind me, I'd do the math, that if you're a worker, a female worker bee, you're actually better off serving the hive rather than trying to reproduce. This is how this whole system works. This is what makes it work, because if your father gave 100% of his DNA to make you, and your mother gave 50% of her DNA to make you, and all your siblings have the same father, all the other workers, that means that if the queen has a baby, your little sister that can reproduce, you share 75% of your DNA with her and only 50% of your DNA with your mother. So this close kin relationship, owing to the fact that all of the females in the hive have one father, and he gave 100% of his DNA to them, it means that they're all closer related than they would be to their own parent, in this case their mother, the queen, and so it creates an incentive to put a tremendous amount of effort in the survival of one reproductive sibling further down the road than to actually go out into the world and risk, getting predated or killed in order to pass their own genes on. So that's kind of how it works. It works remarkably similar. You can actually see something kind of sort of like that developing in small villages where kin selection has still, not been completely eroded by modernity and globalization. You see people behaving a lot better and getting along a lot better. Part of that is because there's a very good chance that person you're passing by on the street, the reason you'll help them is they have some of your DNA. So helping them helps you from an evolutionary standpoint. So that's how eusociality develops in Hymenoptera because of haplodiploidy. The thing that distinguishes the adults anatomically from all the other of the big five, well, any insect for that matter, and it's kind of strange to talk about because you look at bees, ants, and wasps and you think, well, they don't really have a lot in common physiologically themselves. Well, yeah, in bees and ants, you've got that gaster, that slender waist, ants and wasps. But you don't see that in primitive wasps like sawflies, and you don't see it in bees. Well, what they have in common is where the name comes from, Hymenoptera. That means membrane wing. And if you ask someone, an adult or a child for that matter, to draw a bee, they would probably draw it with two wings. Well, as I've mentioned in previous videos, just about all the insects, except for the one in the next Big Five topic, the next episode, they all have four wings, if they have wings at all. And what's interesting about Hymenoptera is it kind of looks like they only have two. Well, the reason for this is that the hind wings are hooked by a little membrane to the forewings. And so it kind of, sort of, unless you're looking real close, or unless they have a disease that made them separate, which does happen in honeybees. I have honeybees, and that's something to look out for. If it looks like they have four separate wings like a dragonfly, something's wrong. But there's a little membrane that sort of connects the two, hooks them together, almost Velcro-like, and that's what makes them sort of look, to the casual observer, like they only have two wings. And that's what they're named after. And you can see this with flying ants. Like if you see ants in their nuptial flight, which it's really hard not to right now, this time of year, dog days of summer, you go outside, you'll get like elite males, or alite, whatever you pronounce it, or queen ants just all over you. The little winged ants, that's what they are. They are either males or young virginal queens who are literally flying out there to mate with males, and then they land on the ground, they tear their wings off because they don't need them anymore. I have mentioned in a previous video, the wings of insects are expressly to find a mate for the most part. There are very few exceptions to that. Dragonflies come to mind because they're voracious predators, but you get the idea. I'm not trying to get on another topic there. But they tear their wings off, and then they burrow in the ground, and then they start a nest, and then they're the queen of a hive. So yeah, neat stuff. That's about it. Well, I was going to talk about that exception of the rule. There's one juvenile Hymenopteran that looks different from the rest, and that is the sawfly. Sawfly larvae confuse the crap out of people. It's one of the things I commonly get text pictures about. Like, what is this? I've never seen a caterpillar like this. Well, it's because it's not a caterpillar. It is a sawfly larvae. They look kind of like caterpillars, but they have they're not fuzzy at all, and they have kind of a hard head capsule that's different, and then they often move in a group, all the siblings born at once, and they kind of look like one big organism, which is a great strategy, and you see this a lot of insects, and especially you see it in schools of fish. They swim in a real cluster to look kind of like one big thing. Sawfly larvae do that to a degree that scares the crap out of people. They'll see them and they think it's like a giant sluggy thing, and then they look closer and they realize it's a giant sluggy thing made out of caterpillar-looking stuff. Well, it's a sawfly. A sawfly is just sort of like the primitive ancestor of bees and wasps, and it's freaky looking, but it's pretty much harmless. So yeah, I would Google that, and then if you ever see something like that, it's not going to be a problem. Yeah, that just about covers it. I'll probably end up doing some addendum episodes just on ants, just on bees, and just on wasps, because yeah, it's a big order, and there's just so much diversity and interesting things to talk about. But if I were to talk about all three of them like that in one video, it would probably be like a 40-minute video, and I have no intention of making a 40-minute video. So that covers Hymenoptera compared physiologically, evolutionarily, behaviorally to other insects. Oh, one more thing. I guess I should probably point this out. Really, all a bee is, they don't have the wasp waist, but the big thing about a bee is just kind of like a very specialized vegan wasp. That's really what a bee is. The difference between bees, I see all these internet memes about, bees are great and wasps are evil. Wasps are carnivores. That's what they do. They're obligate predators. Every now and again, you'll see them supplement their diet with like nectar or Mountain Dew. That's why yellow jackets can be so annoying outside. But for the most part, they eat meat, and they feed the larvae meat. And so they go after roaches and caterpillars and spiders and all sorts of other things. Whereas bees, they just specialize in one non-meat related field, which is pollen and nectar. That's all bees consume for the most part. So that's what makes a bee a bee. A bee is like a wasp without the waist. That it's got a fat belly instead of that scrawny little weird gaster-looking thing. But that's really what differentiates them, is their diet. They go after flowers, they go after pollen, they go after nectar instead of being carnivorous. So that's the chief difference. But yeah, that covers Hymenoptera. Like, share, subscribe, and keep asking questions. Bye.